This week, my guest Jennifer shares how the universe put her at the right place at the right time, which led to a wonderful career helping women reclaim their voice. We talk about spiritual awakenings, holistic healing, flower essences, as well as the connection between food, our weight, our body image, and our voice. This episode contains discussions about drug use and disordered eating. Listener discretion is advised. I'm your host, Deshanka, and you're listening to That Was the Moment I Began Co-Creating with the Universe to Find My Purpose. My guest today is Jennifer Hendler. Jennifer is the founder of Claiming My Voice, a holistic psychotherapy practice that specializes in helping women break free from stifling their voice to reach their full potential. In her Sisterhood Circle program, ordinary souls of service and leaders get to the root of what's holding them back from claiming their voices in their relationships and careers. Thank you so much for being here today, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about what life was like before your moment.
Coming out of college, and I felt a little lost. I didn't really know what was next for me. I wasn't sure what direction to go in. I didn't have a job lined up. I was amazed at the people who could get things lined up while they were finishing their college studies. Before we graduated, they were going out and they were interviewing and they were clear about what was next and they had it all together. I graduated and I didn't know what was next.
And what were you studying?
American civilization, which I don't really think explains what it is. So the way that I explain it is that even though it really was based on the USA, what I was studying was really how all of the layers are connected and in relationship with each other. By the layers, I mean of the personal, the individual person, the family, the community, and then the culture and society at large. So I was studying how each one of those impacted the other and vice versa. Because in college, I took a psychology course because I was always interested in psychology, and people always said, "Oh, you're a natural, you're born to be a psychologist," and things like that. But when I took the course in college, it didn't appeal to me. It was very methodical. It was about research. It was about studies with mice and rats. And it was about very technical terms. And so when I found American civilization, that really appealed to me because that was about people in culture and how people were surviving or thriving or connecting in the culture. So, for example, I took a course it was called Material Culture, and it was about how things that happened in the culture impacted everyone at large. So, for example, when amusement parks first started, the impact of amusement parks on the family, on the culture. So all of a sudden, people were going from staying in their communities on Saturdays and Sundays to driving farther out in order to go to the amusement park. That's just one small example, but I found that so fascinating. So I did a research paper on the effect of cell phones, which were fairly new at the time. So
that would have been very interesting.
It was very interesting because that was at the very beginning when cell phones were huge blocks that you put up to your ear. And it was really the beginning of when people were beginning to be able to work outside of the office.
Yeah.
Because they were portable. And so they could take their work on the road. So things like that. But it also translated into looking at other cultures. And
tell us about your moment.
So here was my moment. So when I was in college, particularly in my senior year, I started to get really fascinated and a bit distressed about women's relationships with their bodies and food. And by that, I mean their negative
Mm-hmm.
relationships with their body image and with food. And I started doing a lot of research around women struggling with eating disorders. Was percolating before I left college. And then when I was in this place of, I don't know what to do, I don't know what's next, I thought, well, I'm really interested in that. And that feels really important to me. And so I think it would be good to just follow that interest and inspiration and go get some information about what people are doing in the field of eating disorders. So I called this treatment center in my area, which is a nationally renowned, very successful and very effective treatment center for women struggling with eating disorders. And it was just about 25 minutes from my house. And I called them and I said, I'm just looking for information about your treatment center. I just would love to talk to somebody about what you're doing there. And
Mm-hmm.
they set me up with a meeting. So the day that I went for my meeting, I came into the front doors and I sat on a bench, and there was a woman sitting next to me. And she turned to me and she said, "Oh, are you here for the interview?" And I said, "What?" Um, it just so happened that they were hiring that day for people to be in a certain role at the treatment center. So when I walked into this meeting, it actually turned into an interview and I was hired that day.
That's amazing. So you just, I guess, were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of divine guidance.
Oh, definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah.
So, yeah, divine timing, divine
Funnel.
guidance. What can happen when you just follow your next intuition?
Mm-hmm. I love that. That is so amazing. And so what got you interested in the eating disorder side of things to begin with? Did you have one yourself or did you know someone that did? What piqued your
I
interest
lived
in
in a
that?
house with 12 women, and I was at an Ivy League school. And so the women that I was in this house with were really very intelligent, beautiful women. And they were really focused on their food and their bodies. And so I remembered, just getting into some distress myself and this um, feeling so sad about the fact that all of these really bright women were consumed with this topic.
Mm.
There was a muffin store that opened near our house, and it was really the conversation of the day. What muffin were they going to get? Were they going to eat all of it? Were they going to get the
Right.
fat-free one? Now they had a fat-free one. There was so much conversation about these muffins. And I remember walking down the street thinking, what could we be talking about if we weren't talking about these muffins? There's so many. I know these women are doing such incredible things. They're going to all of these classes, they're studying things that are really meaningful and powerful, but the conversation is about the muffins. So that's really what started it. And then it just kept going from there. It just sparked me. And that really continued. That's really women who, it's very common actually for women who struggle with disordered eating, or if you go even more extreme to severe eating disorders, it's very common for these women to be extremely intelligent, wise, um, beautiful women who on the outside look like they have it all together and on the inside are really suffering and struggling and getting pretty self-destructive.
When you were interested in it, we wouldn't have had, things like Instagram, all of that. But there were fashion magazines and the celebrity magazines, and the models were all, I guess you'd call them a size zero in the US. So it was definitely look that you had to be if you wanted to be on a cover of a magazine or on TV.
The case, I mean, we're working through it, we're breaking through it, but my brother's in the entertainment industry. He's an entertainment lawyer out in Los Angeles, and it's still the case.
Mm.
There's still pressure on women who are in the entertainment industry, who are actresses, to have a certain body size and type. It's shifting over time, but it's still there.
I know I have so many conversations with my friends about not even food necessarily, but more like I ate badly today, or I was naughty and I ate, blah, blah, blah. So, not necessarily about like what we were eating, but the fact that there are good foods and bad foods. And also, I have a lot of discussions about, I guess, our size. Oh, I'm bloated today. I can't wear that today. And I guess, is that not just part of like being a woman?
I think it is, but I'm not sure it's the direction we want to keep moving in.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's
I
very
feel
true.
you. I hear you. I actually really just in the past couple days, I don't even really know why, but it just is kicked up for me. I'm looking at my body and I'm like, oh my God, I think I've gained weight. I haven't been going to the gym. I am getting uncomfortable with how I look, and I'm just noticing it. I'm just noticing what the dialogue is and the discomfort that I'm having, because now I'm 53 and I'm in menopause and my body's changed so much. Really something to figure out, not figure out, but to make some peace with, and to be
Mm.
um, self-loving around. And what was an interesting thought this morning as well was, I just had a weekend where I live outside of Philadelphia. My husband and I went to New York City, and we had this really amazing weekend. I was really in my power. I was really in my pleasure. I felt really great the whole time. Him and I had really amazing intimacy time, and I felt very like free. And then I thought this morning, well, this is so interesting. I just had that beautiful weekend, and now I'm looking at myself and I'm being down on myself. Like,
What's changed?
what's that about?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that about? And so it's not really true that I can't have pleasure and I can't feel good and I can't enjoy myself at this size and this weight. But why am I all of a sudden focusing on that today?
Yeah.
So the thing that I discovered, because I think this is really one of the most powerful parts of this story and how things evolved. The thing that I discovered when I really started working with women struggling with eating disorders is that the eating disorder and their preoccupation with food and weight was a substitute for their voice.
Interesting.
It was really a coping mechanism for all of the feelings, emotions, wounds, and traumas that they didn't feel safe talking about or working through.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they had had a lot of experiences where they tried to speak their truth, or they did speak their truth, and what they got back was rejection, criticism, gaslighting.
Mm.
And so they made a decision at some point, whether it was emotional trauma, sexual trauma, physical trauma, or just the trauma of being a woman in the culture, I better not speak up. It's not okay to do, I can't, I don't know how else to deal with this
Mm.
without being able to be my authentic self and speak my truth and have support with what I'm really hurting around. And from there, they turned to food as a way to cope, either by not eating
Mm-hmm.
or by overeating, both of which numbed their feelings in different ways and numbed, kind of squashed their voice.
That's that is so interesting, and I can see that correlation. I was always under the impression it was about control.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I can see stifling your voice. I can see how that correlates with the eating. And I guess again it's a different way of controlling as well.
Totally. The control is in there for sure. It's just not all about control,
Yeah.
but it absolutely is. Well, if I can't flow, if I can't be myself and speak truth and live truth, um, I am going to try to control things to prevent feeling certain ways, to prevent getting those reactions, to
Yeah.
prevent being vulnerable. Yeah.
And
And so
so
when you're talking about, sitting around as a group of women and getting focused on food and weight, and I was naughty and all of that stuff, it's so self-deprecating. And
mhm.
but the question that came up for me with my college friends, it's like, what would we be talking about if we weren't talking about this? Like, and if we wouldn't be talking about maybe something we're interested or something we're passionate about, what are we not talking about? What are we not saying?
That is a really, really good point, because I can distract by talking about this. And so I don't actually have to talk about that.
Right, exactly, exactly. There's some way that this layer doesn't feel as scary, as vulnerable
Mm.
in terms of being visible with what I'm really struggling with.
Yeah. But I think maybe we don't feel so vulnerable because it's something that every woman copes with. But maybe, as an example, like I would talk about, oh, I'm feeling a bit bloated today, or blah, 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 rather than, oh, my boyfriend and I had this fight. So,
Totally. Right.
yeah, do you know, like I think maybe because you don't want to be vulnerable in that way, but because every woman has at more than one time in their lives not been at peace with their body. So you've got that in common already, but you don't want to stand out by saying, actually, my boyfriend and I had a fight, and assuming that they have perfect relationships themselves.
Yes. I'm just like a full body yes to what you're saying,
Yeah.
because what I'm hearing, and again, this is so related to the evolution of what I wound up creating, but is that fear that we're going to speak up and we're not going to belong and we're not going to be accepted and we're going to be the odd person out. And we're comparing ourselves to other people and we're making up a story that they've got it all together and we don't.
Yeah.
And so often the opposite honestly happens. Like, it doesn't have to be so black and white, but truly, when one woman has the courage to speak her truth about what's really going on, another woman is like, oh my God, thank God, me too.
I think in our lives, we're always trying to seek connection. We're always trying to seek companionship, and complaining about our body weight bonds us.
Right, right. The same thing is maybe like, you know, drinking can bond
Mm-hmm.
people. And if you decide that drinking isn't good for you anymore, sometimes that actually disconnects. You need to disconnect from relationships if that was a bond and you
Yeah.
weren't able to get to another place with your bond. And there's there's something else that's coming up for me, which is, there's the knowing that we're not alone because somebody else literally has the same experience that's so soothing and so
Mm-hmm.
comforting. And I have that experience to myself. I can feel alone in something. I might rationally know that other people in the world are dealing with it, but it's not until I'm talking to someone who's saying that they're going through it that I'm like, this feels so good to be talking with someone else who has this going on. So
Yeah.
there's that piece for sure. And that's one reason why I created my Sisterhood Circle program, because from the beginning, when I went to that treatment center, the power was in the group. The
Yes.
power was in the Sisterhood Circle. The power was in the women coming together and saying, me too, me too, me too. And that's the power of the Me Too movement that wound up happening. So that was foundational for me to say, loud and clear, women need safe spaces to be able to speak their truth and be heard.
Yeah.
Without judgment, without criticism, without somebody talking back. But the safety to explore how they were feeling, speak their truth, and have people who knew what it felt like and who were going through a similar thing. So that's that part. There's another part, though, that came up when you were talking, which was, and what if we are in a vulnerable moment and our friends aren't having the same experience? Can we still dare? Can we still dare to be where we are? Because that's this moment in time. And they're where they are, and not have a judgment, not have a negative judgment about ourselves or anybody else for that matter, if we're having a struggle and they're not. And can we dare to receive love and support for the struggle we're having, even if somebody isn't? Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Yes.
can each of us dare to be the one who in that moment is more tender and vulnerable? And I think the way we can dare is when we know that we will be received with love and non-judgmental support. Because
And when we feel safe, when we feel safe, yeah, with the people we feel safe with, because it's not safe to say that to everyone. And I think that's a really important part of it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So who we surround ourselves with really matters. So we can take these risks.
I love when you were talking about the sisterhood circle, because there is something amazing that happens when women come together.
Amazing.
And I like, whether that's organizing a party, whether it's just sitting on the sofa drinking wine and talking, when you can just be with women and feel comfortable enough to be, like you said, vulnerable and honest and open. I think you can feel that magical connection. You can feel that power. Many years ago in London, every new moon, I would attend a red tent ceremony. The red tent ceremony came from, when women would menstruate, and they would leave the group and go and create this beautiful sacred space for them all to just be together without the men. And that's when they got to share their stories, share their recipes, share their art, share everything. And so we used to do that every new moon, and it was one of the most special places. And we were women of all ages, all colors, from so many different backgrounds, and it didn't matter, because one of the most powerful things, I think, was we would go around the group and we would do oracle cards. And Katie, the facilitator, she's just incredible. And she would always say, remember, when there's a message, this message could be for you, just because someone else is reading it. And you would often sit there and someone would start talking. You'd be thinking, are you reading my mind? You were talking earlier about divine intervention, getting you to that interview. I think also the universe has this way of putting people in your circle exactly when you need them. to hear exactly what you need to hear. And someone else could tell you it, but it wouldn't register. But because you're choosing to be open in that moment, so you are open to the wisdom from others.
That totally resonates with me. I actually often say the same thing about the oracle cards when we pick them in circle, and I often start out my sisterhood circles by really acknowledging that by being in this space together, we are meant to be together. We are meant to learn from each other. We are mirrors for each other.
Yes.
And we're all here to walk each other home. And sometimes there's that absolutely yummy, mushy, oh, she's saying exactly, what's on my mind, like what you were saying. And it feels so synergistic in that way. And sometimes somebody says something and it triggers something uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you have a reaction because it reminds you of something from your past, or it reminds you of a quality in you that you struggle with, and that to me is the same positive potential as the yummy. It's like, because it feels harder, but it's still that divine message coming through of exactly what we need in that moment, that the woman is bringing to us by being in circle with us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And showing us what part of ourselves still needs some love, attention, and healing.
Exactly.
And so how long did you work at the eating disorder place?
Well, yeah, I worked there for a couple years, and then I decided to go to grad school. And what wound up happening was I kept coming back to women struggling with eating disorders. Whether I meant to or not, I just kept coming back. And it was really, this is where my practice, the name of my practice was born, because my practice is called Claiming My Voice. And, it really, really started at the very first treatment center, learning that the eating disorders were substitutes for their voice, and seeing that that's what was happening. That's what the women were doing, was they were claiming their voices by shifting their attention away from their focus on food and weight into what was needing to be expressed and worked through and transformed, what healing was actually needed. So that's really where like the seed was planted. And so then I went to grad school to do some grassroots organizing. That was my focus. I'm going to be a grassroots kind of activist. And then I got there, and by my second year, grad school was just 2 years, I did a track called School Social Work. And while I was doing that, I met a woman who was a public health nurse, and we created a group for 8th grade girls. And this became the only thing I wanted to spend my time and energy on. Her and I had a really beautiful connection, and we really loved planning this group and getting together with these girls and supporting them. And lo and behold, what came through was issues with food. And by the end of grad school, I was in the know of one of the girls was really struggling with a pretty serious eating disorder. And so I was stepping into a role of helping her and her family get more help for this.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, here I am again. And as I leave grad school, I want to keep going with this. This is where I'm landing, I'm landing here again, and I'm feeling completely compelled and interested and called to support women. So it just kept going from there. So I left grad school and I came back, and oh, this was so fascinating. So I didn't have a place to work when I came back from grad school. I arrived home within weeks. There was a fire. I was living with my parents, and there was a fire in my parents' house. And we actually had to leave the house for like 3 months while the house was getting restored. And so I signed up with a temp agency because I didn't have a job. It was a social work temp agency because I went to school for social work. And the very first placement they had for me was in a hospital on the eating disorders unit.
That's crazy. Got to just keep following the path laid in front of you. You know,
It
that's
was
incredible.
incredible. Yeah,
And are you a spiritual person?
very,
Okay. Were you
very.
always a spiritual person?
That's a great question because yes, but I didn't know it.
Mm.
Creative person, I had access to kind of other realms, and I grew up Jewish and I had a lot of questions, and I met with my rabbi at some point to ask questions. So I was reflecting on God and source and what that meant to me, and what does this all mean. But I do sometimes think, what would my life have been like if people were tuned into this part of me? Because I'm not just spiritual, but I'm a mystic. And if somebody had seen this in me and known this in me and been supporting this in me from a much younger age. So I can tell you that I'm completely sober now, and that's a big part of my journey. But it was really when I started smoking pot when I was in high school that I more obviously tapped into this part of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a doorway to understanding that this mystical part of me existed.
Mm.
I came to understand that this part of me existed regardless of whether I was, smoking pot or doing mushrooms or
Yeah. You didn't
LSD.
need the other things to bring it
I
out.
didn't need the other
Yeah.
things. That was a part of me. And over time, as I got older and older, I just kept nourishing that part of me until I decided that actually smoking pot was taking that power away from me to the fullest capacity.
Yeah.
And so I stopped doing it, and it's just been kind of developing from there.
I think what you were saying before about someone to kind of help you through, I think because I that resonates a lot with me. But my mum's always been spiritual, and when she would kind of talk spiritually to us, we would just hush her, like, "Oh, stop, mum," you know. And I think for me, my journey to find my spirituality again needed to happen the way it happened. Otherwise, I don't think I would have believed it. I think I needed those crazy moments, like you just sitting down for a meeting and actually ending up in a job. Those moments, I think for me, I needed those crazy coincidences, as people would call them, but they're not, as kind of proof. Like, hey, look, this is magic. What happened,
Yeah.
what just happened was magic. Because I think if
Yeah.
my mum told me, oh, there's so much magic in the world, she could tell me every day. But unless I saw it for myself and experienced it for myself, I don't know how much I would have believed.
I totally get that. We have to have our own experiences.
Mm.
We have to embody it ourselves. And especially as kids, what you're saying is actually giving me hope because when my son was younger, he was so open,
Yeah.
and I was doing all of this holistic healing with him, and he was working with the flower essences,
Oh,
and he
amazing.
was very clear that they were helpful. And now he wants nothing to do with them. He's questioning their validity, all of these things. And I just am riding the wave because I don't know where he's going to land, but I think he's in that place where he is developing his own identity, and he needs to, and he is where he is. And so I'm hoping that eventually he can have a broader perspective or his own experiences so he can come to it on his own versus it just being because I said so, but work with the flower essences as a huge part of my life and my practice. And I just got connected with this line of flower essences where this is exactly related to what you're saying. I used to tell people about being a flower essence therapist, and they would say, well, what is that? And then we would have an intellectual conversation about it because they would want to know, well, what do you mean? How does that work? What do they do? And I would do my best to connect it on a personal, emotional level, but it was still a more intellectualized conversation. And I just brought back this new line of flower essences from Arizona, and traveling with them wherever I go, and I'm sharing them with people. And what's happening is that I can offer them an in the moment experience that is so powerful that they believe it. It just works. It just works. They don't need to even have such an intellectual understanding because they're open to trying it, and then they experience it and they're like, oh my God, you just misted me with that flower essence blend, and I'm having an instant shift in my energy and my mood.
A reason I love like holistic healing is that it's not just about the brain. It's not just about the talk therapy. It's not just about talking about what's going on in your mind. It's about letting your body do what your body naturally does. And I think by using our minds too much, we've stopped our body from continuing to do what it's meant to do. We're regenerating all the time. Our bodies know exactly what to do, but it's when our mind gets into it that we kind of go, oh, no, I'm not going to do that, or kind of stop it. So yeah, things like the flower essences and any kind of holistic healing where you can't rationalize it. I think that's when like real healing can start happening. And I think it awakens something in your body because your body is instinctively feeling and doing as opposed to thinking.
I love that perspective. It's just so beautiful and really resonates with me as far as you saying that we have an innate wisdom, and our body has an innate wisdom, and our body has an innate capacity to guide us and to heal. And just yesterday had an experience with someone who came to me, and they were really struggling, and they were having physical symptoms of headache and nausea. And so I worked with them with the flower essences, and then exploring what was going on. And they came to their own conclusion about that. They said, well, we kind of got there together as well, but it was like, I'm trying to figure all of this out just with my mind. And I can't just talk myself from, the neck up through all of the challenges that I'm facing. My body is telling me at another level that I'm needing something else. That was part of what, he would get to through our conversation and through working with the flower essences, is what else he needed to support him through this very challenging time. And then it's like this beautiful moment where the mind comes back in, but in a different way. Because then you can use your brain to reevaluate, to see another perspective, to see more possibility and potential. Shifting out of kind of your usual patterns of thinking and believing, into new ones, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, yes, definitely. And so if there's someone out there listening, so going back to what we kind of started with, we're talking about their weight or their eating, their group of friends, what kind of advice would you give them to change that conversation?
Really, where we were before, I think the advice would be to find a safe place for yourself to discover, uncover, connect with what you're not saying, what you're struggling to pay attention to or address. And there really is a huge connection between food and weight and voice. Um, Typically speaking, if you are focusing on food and weight, there's something that you're needing to hear. There's something that is needing and wanting to be expressed in you that you are not listening to, like within yourself, your own voice and your own wisdom. You're not listening to that voice. And there's something that wants to come through and be expressed, like in your relationships or out in the world, in your career. Um, and so that's what I would say is find a safe place to get to the heart of that. Be scary and challenging, and that's the reason why you're not doing it in the first place, because it feels scary and challenging, and it feels on some level, even though it's uncomfortable and can be you can suffer from being focused on food and weight. On some level, it feels easier than it feels to go into some uncertain territory of some other things that may be lurking underneath there. And when you really have a safe space, that's where that's where your true liberation is, and that's where your true freedom is. And what I tell people is, and part of why I love the flower essences as well, is that sometimes when we think about going into a more difficult space with healing, we just think it's scary and it's dark and it's going to be overwhelming. And while there are phases of healing that can be very challenging, we can also pair healing with pleasure. And so I just want to give somebody hope there. As I say, go into the deeper, go into the darker, get to the roots. There's so many ways that you can bring pleasure into that process. So while you're getting to know yourself on a deeper level, while you're going into scary territory, you're also feeling incredibly nurtured and nourished. And you're discovering like magical things about yourself and your process. And so that's really beautiful.
That's great advice. If you could be remembered by one word, what word would it be?
Transformation.
Yeah. And what does transformation mean for you?
Transformation means that whatever comes up in our life, we take that and we use it and embrace it as a way to evolve into higher consciousness, being our authentic selves, bringing our best selves and our highest vision to the world. And if there's anything that's challenging, we find the gold in the challenge, and we alchemize whatever is happening in the present moment to release what's no longer serving, learn from the past, and co-create with the universe the future that we really want to live.
That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Jennifer. I've really enjoyed today's conversation. And I hope that someone out there listening finds the courage to claim their voice after listening to this.
I've loved our conversation so much. I guess I would say that if anybody is interested in learning more, exciting is that I connect with people who are local to me, but I also work with people all over the world. And
I'll be adding
and
your details to the show notes as well so people can
great,
connect with you.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah,
amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully we can chat again sometime.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope today's conversation inspires and empowers you to know that no matter your current situation, your life can change too. All it takes is a moment. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with a friend. If you would like to share your own moment, see the link in the show notes. Until next time, be present in each moment, because you never know when your moment will arrive, or when you have the gift of being a moment for someone else. Take care.